Sounds good. My name is Larry Greenwood. I'm the chair of the Japan Society of Northern California. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for coming to this session. We do about 50 or 60 programs a year, about half of which are in the area of business, technology, and innovation. And we're particularly pleased to be part of this program, BioJent, in partnership with Bajorian and his colleagues that we've been now doing for almost a year. And this will be the fourth, I think, event under this phase of the program, 3 online, 1 in person in Tokyo late last year. Again, very pleased to be part of this and look forward to a really interesting discussion today. And without further ado, let me turn it over to OviBees and his colleagues to run the program. OviBees Bajorian. I think most of you may know him, but OviBees is an entrepreneur and a mentor. He's been working on mentorship programs for entrepreneurs all around the world, and I think pretty much every continent now, right, OviBees?
Yes,
and
yes.
is really is very experienced in this area. So we're very pleased to have the opportunity to partner with him and his organization. Over to you, OviBees.
Thank you so much, Larry, and it's wonderful to partner with you, Japan Society of Northern California, and with Steve on the BioJent program. The event in Tokyo, I encourage our colleagues to check the recordings on the biojent.com platform. And we also have the previous 2 virtual broadcasts. The first one was on fundraising for biotech ventures, and the second one was on commercializing university technologies. Welcome, everyone. Sorry for the small delay. It's a pleasure to have everyone here. I want to welcome also our 2 speakers. We are waiting for our third speaker, David. But in the meantime, I would like to share with you a couple of things about the program, about our speakers, so that you can familiarize yourselves a little bit with who we have with you today. First of all, we specifically organized this panel because we believe building a biotech venture and a venture in general rests upon the skills and the talents of a diverse team, and the way the entrepreneurs are structuring their initial makeup and then the subsequent rounds of building teams is really critical to the success of the venture. Our speakers will share with you in more depth, but I wanted to share why we picked up this specific topic. About our speakers tonight, we have with us Ken Horn. Ken is an experienced healthcare investor, entrepreneur, and executive with over 2 decades of professional success. He currently serves as the managing director of AN Ventures, which is a Japanese-focused biotech fund. Previously, he was the chairperson of R Discovery, Remigis Ventures company creation entity. In this role, he has helped start and invest in Capacity Bio, Typewriter Therapeutics, and Voyage Therapeutics as president and CEO. Previously, as an entrepreneur, he co-founded and led Alin Aesthetics, acquired by Allergan. Also, Simic Bio, acquired by Nordic Bio, and Tion Therapeutics. Before that, he was a founding member of Tautona Group, an early-stage life science venture capital fund backed by Stanford Management Company and other top LPs. He started his career working for The Foundry, a preeminent medtech incubator, and he was an early founding employee at Evolve, acquired by Abbott, Sierra, acquired by Terumo, and others. Ken has a BS and MS from Stanford University in Mechanical Engineering, and he was a Kaufman Fellow Class 17, and he was Jeff Timon's Leadership Awardee. We have with us also Sunny Wu, a longtime friend and collaborator from my time at MIT, our time at MIT, mine and IO. Sunny is also, as Ken, a serial entrepreneur, and he now helps build hard tech companies that will have a positive planet-level impact. He's an investor, advisor, and/or director in 47 early-stage companies, pre-seed to Series A, And the themes for these ventures are material science, industrial biotech, sensors, semiconductors, HVAC, enterprise AI, and digital health. In terms of his strong background, he co-founded Impact Biosystems in 2019, which is a novel muscle fitness sensing devices that was already acquired. Elemental Machines in 2014, which is hardware and software for lab operations analytics, Series B. Misfit Wearables 2011, a fashion-centric wearables and smart home devices acquired by Fossil for 260 million. He served as president and CTO for Fossil Group afterward. IGA Matrix in 2001, a blood glucose monitors and digital health for diabetes, and Fire Spout in 1998, an ML NLP for auto summarization acquired by Ask Jeeves. In terms of numbers, he raised 257 million in 22 rounds, seed to Series C, for companies he founded. Before startups, he worked at Microsoft Research in LLP under Kai-Fu Lee, very famous Kai-Fu Lee. And he worked on a PhD in linguistics at MIT under also very famous Noam Chomsky and Ken Hale. Outside of work, when he's not playing with his two kids, he is mostly trying to learn math, science, languages, or playing games. Our third speakers, we hope he'll join us shortly. David Lucchino, he was the president and CEO of Frequency Therapeutics, a company he founded in 2014. Frequency was born out of the labs of renowned MIT Institute professor Robert S. Langer, and focused on developing therapeutics to activate a person's innate potential to restore function within the body. The company's pipeline included a program for sensorineural hearing loss and remyelination in multiple sclerosis. David brought Frequency public in 2019 after having secured 3 rounds of institutional funding, including a crossover round with Deerfield Management, Perceptive Advisors, and RTW Investments. Frequency 89 million initial public offering was called by Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. In total, he raised 275 million in equity financing, and he secured a joint development and commercialization partnership with Astellas in a deal valued at 625 million for the company lead asset for hearing. Another key number is that Frequency reached a 1.9 billion valuation on the NASDAQ with a 13x return. David co-founded several other companies, including Semprus Biosciences, and he's a very active member and past chairman of MassBio, which is a 1,500-member biotechnology trade association in Cambridge, Massachusetts. This is a lot about our speakers. All of them have really deep and rich backgrounds and big numbers to back. To share with you a little bit about the BioJent program, before I do that, I want to thank the US Embassy in Tokyo, and in particular, Adam Gallagher and Masako Yoda-san, for their support, and also Brendan Posen with the US Consulate in Fukuoka, and our partners, of course, the Japan Society of Northern California, as well as the Greater Tokyo Biotech Community, Setsuo Morishita-san. We are grateful for all the support from all our founders and partners. And in brief about BioJent, this is a program, an entrepreneurship program, a 1 year that is focused on bridging US and Japan biotech communities, both entrepreneurs, investors, professionals in the biotech space, and finding how we can best support the most promising Japanese entrepreneurs working in biotech by leveraging the US expertise, know-how, and investor networks. This program, as Larry mentioned, is organized by our company, OviBees Ventures, jointly with the Japan Society of Northern California. And we are looking at BioJent as a stepping stone in actually building a closer partnership between the US and Japan as it relates to scientific collaboration in the biotech and life sciences space. long introduction. Allow me to move to the first questions. I want to encourage our participants to send us questions either by email at info@ovbees.com or in the chat function if that is available to you. Otherwise, just let us know, and my colleague I think can unmute you. First question, let me go to Ken and also Sunny. What actually inspired you to enter the biotech industry, and how did you build your career? And few snapshots. Obviously, we have 45 minutes to go with the program. I would appreciate a succinct response, and if you can build on each other points, that would be great. Let's start with Ken, and welcome both Ken and Sunny.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to join such a cool program. Of course, for my fund, this is right up our alley. So really happy to have the opportunity to join here. To your question, I had a broader life science background. I actually started in medical devices more so than biotech. But I now spend almost all of my time in biotech. What I really liked about it was based on my some early success, the impact for drugs to change how medicine is conducted, I think is more significant than any other mechanism out there, whether medical devices or whatnot. And my early lessons in life as an entrepreneur is everything is difficult and successes are hard, whether small or large. So if you're going to go for a success, you may as well make it as large as possible from an impact. So that's sort of the upside reason. The downside, the logistical reason is it requires so much specialization to invest into therapeutics. It ends up requiring a lot of time and attention. So to some extent, the network that we build around, our fund and myself ends up being pretty focused around therapeutics. So we kind of stay in that space. Those are the two reasons why I like it. Sunny?
Thank you. Sunny?
Hi there. Hope you can hear me okay. Sorry, this is probably the best space I could find. I'm here in Vietnam, and it's a bit early here. Look, I'll just say up front that my experience with biotech in particular ventures is limited. But when Ovi asked me to be a part of this, I think we were talking about more general entrepreneurial experience, which is what I've had over the years. I feel like, but I think some of the principles of team building, regardless of industry, are pretty similar. Probably the closest thing to a biotech company that I've done is a medical device company, Matrix, which I was with for the first 10 years of its existence, and then we did some great things, and then it was eventually sold. There were the economics of blood glucose monitoring at the time were in some ways seemed very biotech-like, in the sense that it's a fairly high margin business, and then you have a consumable, namely the glucose sensors. The world has obviously moved on to continuous glucose sensing now, and it's very different. In any case, in terms of building teams in such a space, I would definitely I agree a lot with what Ken was saying, that a lot of this does require specialized knowledge, and there's a sense of go big or go home when doing these types of ventures. I think what's important, if I had to summarize the things that I've learned that span different industries over the years, in terms of hiring, let's say, okay. I remember in our first ventures, we really relied a lot on IQ. We had like brain teasers and whatnot, and trying to find the smartest people we could find. Excuse me. But in the end, I think what was really important was actually finding people with a lot of great skill. So skills over just raw IQ, which I think does fly in the face of at least conventional Silicon Valley wisdom to some extent. But we had a lot of like social issues because we had people who could solve great brain teasers, but in terms of being able to get along and just being skillful at certain things, that's another question. In the second company, one of the things I learned about hiring was it wasn't just about experience, but about wisdom. So hiring people, as they say, you need 20 years of experience, 20 years to have 20 years of experience. Well, a lot of times it's not just 20 years of experience, it's 1 year of experience 20 times. Very different from a person who has great wisdom, a person who is right all the time. How do you find such people? It just takes time to find such a those kinds of teams. Ken's been in this business for a long time, so he probably has a crew. People who he's worked with for a long time, so he knows. But as you grow teams, you're going to have to hire people, and especially in the field like biotech and medical devices, you're leaning a lot into expertise, which is very important. And a lot of that comes with wisdom, with experience. But it just has to be you have to really manage that carefully, because a lot of times you hear people saying, oh, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. This is how it's done. You need to do this. But the very essence of a startup is, being able to innovate in an environment of rapid change, right? And I think, so having the wisdom and the flexibility to be able to do that is very important. Depends on the level that you're hiring for, obviously. And finally, I think what I learned from my third startup onwards was about cultural fit. People throw around the word culture a lot, but it's really a thing. It's really important, and culture is about how you behave naturally, and what are the values that everyone kind of inherently shares. Not the values that are on posters and signs in in employee manuals. Okay, those are just propaganda, but it's how people behave, the ethics, the understood rules of social engagement and communication, and establishing those strong values, coherent values early, and having it reinforced by your hires is really important. So if I had to summarize, skills over IQ, wisdom over experience, and cultural fit basically over everything else.
Thank you, Sunny, and we appreciate you joining us so early in Vietnam now. Let me ask Ken the second question, and you as well. How do you navigate the challenges of actually working in a highly regulated industry like biotech and medical devices? What do you see are some of the key challenges? And let's start with Ken, and then also Sunny, and David is just joining us, our third speaker.
If you're not a regulatory expert, you need to have regulatory experts involved, right? I think is the short of it. And maybe stated differently, nobody at a biotech company, whether you're the CEO or whether you're a bench scientist, is expected to know everything. The more senior you are, you're expected to know what you don't know, right? And bring in the right experts to help navigate that. I think that's probably as succinct as answer as I can give you. Is it's not fundamentally different than aerospace or nuclear or defense contracting. It's just the rules of the game are different, and I think amplifying that is patients' lives are at stake. And I don't mean that in a conservative sense. That would be a good reason to not do anything. The flip side is if you don't do something, some of these patients may die or their life will change. And that's motivation to work through the regulated industry. I think the last comment I'll make is you shouldn't view the FDA or whatever governing regulatory agency you're interacting, whether it's the FDA or other regulated industries, as your enemy, right? I always, all my companies have taken an approach as they're doing their job, but they're there to help. They're not there to slap your hand. So be as proactive as possible. Hopefully, whatever agency you're working with is receptive to interaction, and you could avoid as much surprises as possible. I think those would be my quick responses.
Thank you. Welcome, David, for joining us. We appreciate you joining us. The first question for all the speakers was actually what inspired you to enter the biotech industry? And I already introduced your background to the audience. So it'll be great to hear from your end what drew you to actually enter the biotech industry and start and work with ventures in the biotech space.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you, Ovi. And I would just say that I applaud, the previous speaker. I think a lot of what he said was right on target, generally about the biotech industry. For me, it's, I've been driven by really two passions: entrepreneurship and helping patients. And, both of them have been equally important to me in my career, in my life. I am a cancer survivor, and so I bring that perspective to the role of being a biotech leader. So I think that, starting off when I was at MIT, where I got my MBA, winning a business plan competition, giving me some initial confidence, and then starting my first company back in 2007, was really, driven by both of those. And I love getting out there, trying to understand the unmet clinical need, talking to nurses, doctors, patients, anybody, really, investigating the problem that we're trying to solve and really understanding it as well as I could. And then, I think I was also born with a lot of tenacity. You have to, you talk to 80 investors and you just need one yes. And that's, been my experience. You may believe in your idea more than anything, but a lot of times you're going to get no, and you can't let no define you. You have to keep driving till you get to a yes, and you find a group that you want to then partner with. So I think it's the combination of patience, entrepreneurship, and a natural level of tenacity, and I think all sort of wound with a rope of, if you will, metaphorically, leadership. It's such an important part in any endeavor, particularly one where you're trying to solve riddles like you do in the life sciences and biotech. Biology certainly is not a straight line, and having a diverse set of thinkers who all bring a credible background, excites me, and I enjoy building out that type of team.
Great, thank you, David, for sharing your experience with us. Let me move to the next question. If each one of you can share a specific success story from the many ventures that all of you started, and how the role that your team played in accomplishing that specific success story. So if you can underline, how the team got together and how you build that team to actually accomplish that specific success. Why don't we start with Sunny first, and then Ken and David.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. I'm sorry, you paused for just a second there. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is, if you would like to share one specific success from one of the ventures that you built, and what role your team played in accomplishing that specific success.
Sure. I'm sure there are, let's see here. I think the most relevant one probably would be Misfit. This is a wearable technology company that we built and started in 2012. It was a fast exit, not your typical, not very typical of startup exits because of its speed, especially in the devices hardware world. We started in 2012, and within 42 months we were acquired. Investors made, well, depending whether you're seed or Series A investors, but between 36x 33x to 10.5x returns. And so from an IRR perspective, it's very good. But the main thing that really made it kind of made Misfit work was the having a really a multinational team from a fairly early point and being able to leverage each other's strengths. So we had kind of like the much of the innovation team and whatnot in Silicon Valley, full stack hardware, software, design, whatnot. Our large data science and software team in Vietnam, and then a hardware and also a software team in China. And the three teams, it was actually quite a challenge to get the three cultures to bond with each other and to work together well. But we managed to get it to work with a lot of effort, a lot of stress. But I think the main thing that kind of that kind of brought us together was the shared values. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but having a similar kind of behavioral patterns between the three offices really helped. Otherwise, I feel like the teams would have just torn each other apart because of the differences and because of the differences, and also just organizational complexity. Just knowing that there's like this expected, and the behavior patterns were in some ways fairly specific to Misfit, the company. Like there were just certain things we did that were just different. And I'd say one, and this is something that I don't feel gets talked about a lot, is one of the values we had was servant leadership, and that was the more senior you got, the more you were expected to serve your peers and your direct reports, not the other way around. And that did not appeal to quite a few hires that we tried to get in the past, because they thought, no, I'm hiring for a VP position. I expected to be treated like a VP. I'm like, no, VP positions, you are expected to serve your direct reports. And I literally mean to serve them, like you eat last, you're going to be the first to fly coach, that kind of thing, and it just didn't appeal to a large swaths of people. But to the people it did appeal to, it really worked. And so, and these things were just made us distinct. And as a result, I think people became very proud of that. I don't know, that I just want to highlight that one point there.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful to hear about how you can serve your team so that actually they can perform better. Let me shift to a different question for David. Can you please share with us, from your own experience, how do you strike a balance between actually bringing technical expertise versus business acumen when you build a team, so that you have all sides of the story covered in terms of all the skill sets that you need when you build your biotech ventures?
Yeah, it's a great question. And before I do that, I want to just recognize Sonny, and I absolutely love that approach to leadership. My team struggled with that, or some people on my team struggled with that, following more into more hierarchical approach. But I think it's so critical. The more senior you get, the more it's your responsibility to make sure that you're being managed. You're leading your team in a high functioning, I would say, enlightened way. And one of the things that got me the most frustrated was people would wanted me to lead them that way, but they wouldn't lead their teams that way. And that would really get me pretty angry. I mean, not angry in the sense of losing my cool, but really just realizing that they're not the right people for the organization that I want to lead and be part of. To the question that was, asked, I think I think Ken touched upon this, there's a misconception there, nobody has all the answers, chemical engineers, PhDs in molecular biology, whatever your background is, and whatever problem you're trying to solve. And the only way you can win in biotech is by, bringing a diverse group of people together who have multiple, who address multiple areas of technical expertise and business expertise. And I think because so many of the people that I get to work with are so talented academically, but that's not the skill set. It could be a great academician, or I'm not saying it right. Academic. The skill set is, you need people who are shrewd and savvy. You need people who can work together to solve problems. If you're so it's really not about being the smartest person in the room. And so all of that is, so I think working with people who understand that, and realizing raising money is very difficult. And I can't tell you the number of times where it's easy to sit back and criticize the CEO if you haven't been there from the beginning and started this company. But when you have to go out and do it yourself, and you realize how hard it really is and what it really takes to get it done, there's a degree of humility. And I recently had that experience. The company I was running most recently for 4 years as a public company did a reverse merger. And one of the senior scientists was very critical of me until they decided to join a group that had purchased one of our assets and realized how hard it is to go out and actually start from scratch and raise money and grow a company. And so I think my final thought is just, everyone needs the humility, and and if people are caught up in, how does it benefit me? How do I get ahead from a political standpoint? You're only creating, doesn't mean your company's not going to be successful, but you're only creating more complexity, between you and whatever the success you're shooting for is.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, David. And I want to encourage our participants, if you'd like to ask a question, please email it to us at info@ovbees.com, info@ovbees.com, and my colleague Ayo will process your question. We have a few more questions and that I will ask our guests, and would be great to get some of the questions from the audience as well. Let me go to Ken.
I just wanted to add a little color,
Yeah.
maybe to an additional shade to what David was saying.
Please.
There's like a really. Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah. Yes, all good.
And that is, there's like a very fine line, between a founder and a first employee one. Because a lot of people think, oh, employee number one, and that's, that you're practically a founder, or, founder and maybe even CEO in some cases. And that is, one has to deal with payroll and the other doesn't. So like the minute you have to, you're responsible for payroll and people's livelihoods, and you have to pay people, meaning the minute you're responsible for fundraising, life changes. That's just another level of stress. Not running a company, not having to worry about fundraising, and that's all you do. I mean, usually, that's part of the job, but often it isn't. Especially hired-in executives. It's hard to relate. So I'll just highlight, underscore what David was just talking about. It's very hard. It's very stressful, and it never really seems to get easier. In some ways, I haven't really raised that much money, especially given the number of rounds I've had to do it across, like 5 seeds, 5 A's, and 5 B's, and 4 C's. That's a lot of rounds. And it's just been hard every single time, even though people are like, oh, I know who you are. Okay, I'll get the meeting. Anybody can get a meeting. But to win people over every single time, it's just very hard. And one other the thing to build on what David was saying, finding the people with a good fit, it is very hard to find. But I find that it's the stories that are generated in the halls of your organization. It's that really can move and filter people. Like one story we had was with travel. It was just something that for some reason our team was hung up on. And there's this general expectation that if you get upgraded to business class, whatever, you're usually more senior, you're actually expected to give up that seat for the most junior person in our team. So we'll have interns flying in business class. They don't know what they're doing there, but that's because the other folks are just thrilled to give it to them, because that's what you do. And it's just hard to find people willing to do that.
Great to hear the story, Sunny. Thank you. Let me go back to Ken now. Ken, how do you attract and retain top talent in the biotech industry? What were some of the strategies that you used to actually attract some of the best minds and talents for the ventures that you built when you built so many successful ventures?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think, for life sciences in general, there's most of the people involved are purpose driven. So one thing I definitely do not do is, be on the high end of the compensation range. We will very intentionally not hire like at the 75th percentile. We'll be 50th percentile or below, and I think that filters out a layer of people who are, I hate to say, in it for the money, but that's a higher priority. So that's a common trend across all my companies. Secondly, I think given the purpose-driven nature of most people that I find are successful in biotech, let them lead what they're good at, right? You don't hire a bunch of MDs and PhDs and then tell them what to do. You listen to what they have to say. And I think particularly with where life sciences, where you have a lot of specialized individuals, again, whether they're right out of their postdoc or they've been in the industry 20 years, I think the way to hire top people and keep them is to let them exercise what they're really good at. And for me, that's always been the case. And I think David was kind of commenting on that earlier, is when you get to the leadership levels of these organizations, you all should have different backgrounds and paths to have gotten there, right? So by definition, you're supposed to have different backgrounds, and yet you're supposed to function as a team. And that requires you to kind of let people lead what they're good at and what they're experienced at. And I guess for me, the last comment I'll make here is I've always tried to hire the best possible talent that I could hire, even ones who could do my job. And there's the proverbial "what if you got hit by the bus?" I don't really mean it, what if I got hit by the bus? I mean, who's going to challenge me and my opinions? And I think that's really important. I think I had my first CEO responsibility in 2010, and I was 30 years old, so you can kind of do your math of how long I've been doing this. To this day, I don't think I still have never had someone in my executive team who is younger than me. And I think that shows you a little bit of my style, and that's just an example of who's kind of around me. But like, I think that mentality, hopefully starting with me, has pervaded throughout most of my organizations. Is whatever your role, whatever your responsibility, like if you have an experience, you're going to get an audience in the organization to be able to voice that. And for me, that's been the key thing to retain top people.
Thank you, Ken. Let me ask David. The next question is: how do you encourage a culture of both risk taking as well as collaboration between the team members?
I think you have to constantly work your culture, and it starts at the very top. Everybody knows when the CEO is in the office what he or she does, and then how they make decisions. And so it's I think it starts with the CEO and the executive leadership team, and encouraging people to realize that we're not going to be able to make the advancements we want to make unless we are taking smart risks and trying to solve problems that are difficult. It gets back to this idea that I always use of solving riddles. It's not a straight line. And so as people think about designing animal studies or working with people, different academic institutions, it's kind of like one part sort of hustle and getting out there, and then one part trying to think in a non-linear fashion about what's the problem at hand and how do I solve it. I don't know, this is kind of a little bit to your question, but the way I always look at problems is, I'll tackle any problem because I'm not going to try to solve it myself. I mean, that's ridiculous. I'm going to go out and find really smart people, whether they recently retired from, big pharma, or they have 20 years of biotech experience. I'll go find the right people who I believe would know the right answers. And now that I've done this long enough, I kind of can get to those people pretty quickly. I think it's an example of, don't expect to find the answer in a textbook for what we're trying to do if we really want to move the mountain. And what I would say is, then you're going to have to take, calculated risks based off of what you know. And, we live in a world of limited time and limited resources. And, that's what we're expected to do. Our best judgment has to prevail. Sometimes it will work, sometimes it won't work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, David. Let me ask the next question from Sunny. What role do you think mentorship plays in the development of successful biotech professionals and teams as well? It will be good to hear from your experience.
I think in just any field, mentorship is super important. People say that you should always have a personal board of advisors, board of directors type of thing, just like a company can have a personal board of advisors or a director. And having a set of go-to people that you can ask the hardest questions is super important. But it's actually, I think, one of the hardest kind of roles to find, especially for founders, because I feel like founders have problems that are so unique. And there's so few people you can talk to, because you can't really talk to, management, because sometimes that's part of the problem. Maybe you're the problem and management, won't tell you. You can't tell investors a lot of times, because talk to them, because maybe, there's a conflict of interest there. And really, you can't talk to your spouse because they don't know what you're talking about. You're off doing whatever in your venture. And often the only other people you could find are other founders. So there's this mentorship role where you can potentially finding folks for yourself that it can be hard to find, but just finding peer other founders who are not financially involved in your company, not in your company, that's useful. From a internal company perspectives, having mentorship programs, I don't know how. I've never been successful in setting something like that up. I feel like these relationships happen organically, and encouraging them is good rather than through formal programs. Maybe you can do. I'm sure other people have been successful. I just haven't figured it out. I just found that being a part of formal programs, trying to set them up in the past, just hasn't worked, because the relationships are rather warm and that the trust, it was hard to build that trust inorganically.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sunny. Let me ask Ken now a question. As you operate at the intersection of both the US and Japan entrepreneurial cultures and ecosystems, what do you see some of the similarities and differences between the two ecosystems, especially as they relate to the biotech sector and team formation?
Man, that's a tough one. Look, I think the beauty of science is it's a common language, right? And one of the reasons for the first question you asked the panel that I like biotech is, for the most part, a drug is based on science and it's market irrelevant. If the drug is going to work, it's going to help patients all over the world. Now, the reimbursement and the profit possibility, blah, blah, all those things are, of course, market dependent, but it's not the same market risk as, like, is Twitter going to work in Japan because it works in the US? Or is Amazon going to work in Japan because it works in the US? That market risk is different. So in that regards, the basis for that innovation, the basic research and the basic science, is the common language that I think makes these teams work together, and what bridges these borders, because the market risk is not shared, so to speak. Or if the drugs work, it should help patients everywhere. In terms of like what I see common between teams that we form in Japan and teams that we form in the US, is this purpose-driven element most of the people that we hire could find better opportunities if you want to define that by compensation or job security, right? They're in this because they care. I think that's probably the most common trait that I see between people at our startups in Japan and people that are startups in the US. You didn't ask me about the difference, but I'll go ahead and answer that part too. I think in Japan, just because the cycles of entrepreneurship, it's still in like first inning, versus in the US, that's had the, I don't know what inning the US is in, but it's had the most innings globally, right? In terms of the number of cycles of entrepreneurship. I think that gap shows up the most. And, in the US, I bump into a lot of people, a lot more people like Sunny and David, who've been there, who have the battle scars to prove it, and can provide advice based on that experience to the teams. And that's good. And it's mostly good. Occasionally, if you have too many battle scars, you're like, oh, I'm done. I don't want to take another battle scar. But for the most part, it's good, right? On the flip side, what I see in Japan, I think is less battle scars, and perhaps because of that, more enthusiasm. And I think generally that's a good thing, because that enthusiasm will lead to battle scars more quickly, and then we'll have more experienced entrepreneurs in Japan. But I do hope that the battle scar process doesn't discourage too many people, because it is the only path towards experience.
Wonderful points. Thank you so much, Ken. Let me ask David now a question, and feel free to add as well, Ken and Sunny. Obviously, we are living in a society where things move very fast. How are you staying up to date with the latest advancements and breakthroughs in the biotech and life sciences, David?
I do panels like this, and
Great. Thank you.
It's a fair question. I'm always paying attention to what's going on generally in our industry. When you're running these companies, I ran my last company for 8 years, you don't really think about a whole lot more. I mean, I'm aware of what's going on, don't make any mistake. But I think, as Sunny said, I'm worrying about raising money, making payroll, getting deals done. We did a big partnership with Astellas Pharmaceuticals in my last company. So those take a lot of time. I read, I'll peruse sort of scientific journals. I stay in touch with like my friends like Bob Langer at MIT and Jeff Karp and others. I think now that I'm out of my company, as I mentioned, we did a reverse merger back in November, and that company got up to about $1.9 billion market cap at one point, and there was really good early data that couldn't be replicated as we were going to larger studies, and so I think with all of this learning that I have, it kind of lets me think about what's going on and how it is that you create value and prove what you're doing in the most definitive way. Those go hand in hand. And so I start looking for things that kind of start to fit that mold of what my experience has been. Doing early stage life sciences is exciting, but continuing to think about what are the areas that you can definitively show progress and better patient outcomes. And so I will gravitate, as I think about whether it's AI or other things like that, with those natural biases that I've had. I think that answers your question. It was kind of
Yes.
So I'm sure the others have thoughts too.
Yeah. Let me ask now Sunny a question, and happy to collect the answers on good resources for learning to stay up to date and share with the audience. But let me ask a key question, I think, from Sunny, and please feel free to contribute. How have you handled conflict, crisis, and unexpected challenges within your teams and industry as you build the different ventures that you develop? What have you learned along the way?
Oh man, I was hoping to be able to answer the question that David was answering. But this is a good one. This is a very relevant one.
Yes, we
And
talk about teams, so it's really
oh
critical.
man, yeah, man, I don't know if I've actually really gotten good at it and have much wisdom in doing it, to be honest, because I feel like the challenges are so multi-variable and so varied in so many situations. And I wish I could just give a nice, straightforward typology of conflicts. You know, in this type of conflict, you do this, and then in this type of conflict, you do that. I'm sure there is a way to do that, but I like that wisdom. That said, you know, I feel the holy grail is always trying to get to that win-win for everybody. Or if you shift perspectives a little bit, it's about how to get to the minimally unhappy situation for as many parties as possible. I feel like that's often uh, what you can aim for, and then as post-conflict situations arise, I think often people realize, oh, this is about pride and emotions and reputations more so than just sheer benefits. You know, that's almost always about those things. And so it's often about just like finding a minimally unhappy situation for everyone and then writing it out and working through the post-conflict era for teams. I know that's a very abstract thing to say, but I think that's the one principle that I've seen is, you know, when you go to sleep at night, one of the great things about sleep is it washes out a lot of the negative emotions, and oftentimes conflict can kind of go away with some good sleep, to be honest, and with time. Uh, yeah. But that said, it's usually finding areas of common interest. Obviously, the traditional wisdom is you try to find the areas of commonality and then build on that. You know, but face it, in the end, people are going to be unhappy about something, and you're just trying to find that local minimum. Just with that said, you know, building on a little bit about what David was saying about learning, you know, learning is something is a topic I've been thinking about for quite a bit in recent years, and because it's something I just love to do. So if I were to give like some concrete, just like share what I do, you know, I have a pyramid of content consumption, and so let me just share that, and maybe this is helpful because the biotech medical devices, these are very technical areas, and there's just a lot of information out all the time. So here's what I do to stay to just continue to have relevant knowledge and skills. First, I read I consume almost zero current events information. So almost like 1% of my time reading the news. So it's fun. I don't know if it's fun or not, but I didn't even know that the Ukraine invasion happened until about 3 days after it happened, and until someone told me, and then they just couldn't believe I didn't know about it. Well, you know, I just didn't. It didn't really. It's obviously an important event, but it didn't affect my life directly. And you know, I feel like important stuff you eventually hear about and you learn about, and often honestly, often it doesn't really affect what you're doing directly. So very little attention on current events. Also help a good way of regulating mood, by the way, just ignoring the news. And then business books, I read almost zero of them. I find that most business books are horrible and should not exist. You just better to read summaries of them. That's it. A lot of great summary services. That's all you need. Or and then some more of the beefy books. Maybe read audiobooks at 2x speed. Okay. But then a lot of it is in terms of research reports and whatnot. I just have like a set of feeds on RSS feeds that just kind of feed it to me, and being able to scan that and then reading the abstracts. I think that helps a lot. And but a lot of times it's just I spend time learning. So a bulk of my information consumption diet is on what I should say long shelf life knowledge, and that's what I encourage all my friends to do is just focus your learning on long shelf life knowledge. And you know, so I read a lot of textbooks, to be honest.
Good, great advice. Thank you so much. And I think this completes what David said. As we are going towards the end of the program today, we'll just run few minutes over. I wanna ask each one of you what advice would you have for our fellow entrepreneurs in the audience from both Japan, US, and other countries as well, as they are looking to either start or continue to build their own venture? Obviously, you all speak from a mountain of experience, and still there are other mountains to climb for each one of you, each one of us, right? So, but would be great if you would have like a summary of some of the key things that you would advise our audience to be aware of and actually work on in the coming weeks and months and years. Let me start with Ken first, and David and Sunny.
Sure, thanks. I think the biggest encouragement for me is to find experienced feedback and get the experienced feedback and hear it, but it doesn't always mean do exactly as you're told, right? I think that's what an experienced entrepreneur needs to learn, is to be able to hear advice and then figure out how to incorporate the best parts of it. I think for me, having been an entrepreneur and also now wearing an investor hat, you know, if I do diligence people 1A and science 1B, kind of in that order, and entrepreneurs who are really kind of dogged and not willing to take feedback are usually a bad sign for me. The caveat is, as an entrepreneur wearing my entrepreneur hat, if you just do what everyone tells you all the time, you're going to lose sight of what your original inspiration was in the beginning. And finding that balance is what I think makes successful entrepreneurs. And I will pass the pink conch on here. Who was next? Was it David next? All right,
David,
pass the pink conch
thank
to
you,
David.
Ken.
Thank you. No one's going to knock on your door and say, please, co-found this company, or please be the CEO, and I think you're going to have to be motivated enough by the ideas that you're in your head, that you're starting to you memorialize on paper and starting to tell the world. And so I think, it takes a person who believes that they can solve a problem, even though they don't have the resources they need at that particular moment to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's fundamentally, how I've heard entrepreneurship, best defined. And the reason why people take that risk is because they're doing something that they're really excited about and passionate about. And at least in my experience. So, so I would just encourage people to, use that as a bar, which is, you believe you can solve a problem, even though you don't have the resources you need in hand to solve that problem at that moment, or, any near-term moment, maybe years before you have it, but you believe you can get there. So that's my advice.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Sunny?
Boy, some really great advice earlier. I'm just listening here as if I, because I feel like I need that advice, especially what Ken said about feedback. I think getting the operative word here is experienced feedback. Man, that is gold, man. That is so hard to get. Building in a good feedback cycle into organization, something you can talk about for hours, and yourself personally. I would say in terms of, I'll just say one thing, and that is startup life is exceptionally hard. I actually have a blog post, which is an unlisted Medium post, because I don't dare let it be listed just yet. Hopefully, maybe I will. Happy to share it with this group here. But the post is very simply, should you do a tech startup? It's a question that I get, I think, almost daily by this point from people. Hey, should I do a startup? So I decided to write this up. And if there was one, there's a lot of advice in this longish article. I'll share it with you, Ovi, and you can share it with people.
Thank you.
that you think might be interested. But I do say at the end of the post, there's a list of things that you should probably have in store before you do that. And one of the things I mentioned that isn't mentioned a lot is a really good health habit. it is an extremely stressful time. You have very little time, and it seems like it's impossible to have just maintain good health during a startup. But it is so critical that you do that: sleep, exercise, nutrition. In that order, to be honest, in terms of what you need to have. You have to have that if you're going to last 5, 10, 15 years of extreme stress. That's how you deal with it. And if you don't have that going in, it's going to be really hard, that much harder to be successful.
Thank you, all of you, for the great insights and very practical advice. I would encourage all of you to share with me the resources, because we will share it with our audience and broader audience. I want to encourage the audience to email to us the questions at info@ovbees.com. We will share it with our guests. 1 hour is not a long amount of time. We're also lucky to have with us in the audience the former U.S. ambassador to both Japan and Romania, His Excellency Hans Klemm. Great to have you with us, sir. In conclusion, I would like to thank our participants. I would like to thank our wonderful speakers. Always when we do this type of events, we all learn a lot from the speakers, from each other. We are grateful for your time and for being with us today, all of you. I want to share with you that the BioJent program that benefits from the support of the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo and also the U.S. Consulate in Fukuoka and the greater Tokyo bio community is a stepping stone. OviBees, together with the Japan Society of Northern California, we are looking forward to leveraging what we're doing now to actually expand and continue to help our entrepreneurs, our great entrepreneurs in Japan. And we look forward to receiving your ideas of potential partners, potential funders for our efforts, corporations, foundations, just because we do think, as all of you know, this is not a one-year journey. This is a long-term journey that requires the mobilizing each other, mind, resources, and also networks to move things forward. I would also like to thank my colleague Ayo, who has been helping us, and also our team at OviBees Ventures and also the Japan Society of Northern California. And again, I look forward to being in touch with you. I encourage the audience to visit also our program website. It's www.biojent.com. And we do have the recordings of all the programs that we have done so far, all the virtual broadcasts, as well as all the sessions that we have done in Tokyo. I encourage you to go visit them. And of course, we will be in touch with all of you for the coming months. A special thanks to Brendan Possin from the U.S. Consulate in Fukuoka, who was the brain behind the BioJent initiative, and he had the vision to see how U.S. and Japan can join resources to actually set up the foundation of this program that we are now implementing. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Sunny. Thank you, David. I'm grateful for all your time, and I look forward to staying in touch with everyone. Arigato gozaimasu. Hajime mashite. And until next time, thank you so much. I'm Ovidiu Bujorean, your host, and thank you, Larry, also for your partnership.